Somebody wants to join your ERG, but are they a saboteur or are they a supporter? Should your ERG be open to anyone to join? How can you navigate losing the element of the safe space? That's what we're going to be getting into in today's video. Hey everyone, I am Sheryl Miller and this is ERG Strategy, the channel that helps you build effective, engaged employee resource groups and communities that make a big impact. So if that's what you're here for, there'll be videos every Tuesday and Friday. Subscribe, hit the notification bell so that you know when new videos are out. Let's get into this. So this video was inspired by a post I saw on LinkedIn, a real life post on LinkedIn. And it was about an ERG where somebody had joined the ERG and it was felt that the person had joined really just to kind of like be a bit of a spy or a saboteur, to kind of just nosy into what this ERG are doing. Right, it was an ERG. It was an ERG in the States, and obviously, if you watched my video from a few days ago, which you may be linked here or here, you will understand why. Because part of the legislation coming out of the States is that ERGs must be open to everyone. Okay, so that's the situation in the States. Now, that doesn't necessarily apply in other countries, but I have got some statistics about how open ERGs are in other countries. So we ran a survey at the start of the year, in 2025. We ran a survey of ERG leaders from around the globe, but mainly respondents were in the UK and US. And we asked, for your ERGs, what percentage of you have your ERG so that events are open to everyone or close to everyone or hybrid? And also your planning meetings, as in your committee meetings, again, are they open to everyone? Or are they closed, hybrid? How does it work? So the stats, here are the stats. So 4% of ERG leaders that answered our survey said that all of their events are closed. So I worked with an ERG leader, was it last year or the year before? I can't remember, maybe a couple of years ago. And this was the situation. When I first started working with them, all of their meetings, every single meeting was closed to allies. It was purely just for members of the community. Okay. 26% of ERG leaders say that their planning meetings are closed. So that's just for your planning meetings or your committee. That's just over a quarter saying actually when we have our planning meetings, it's closed to allies. It's just members. 81% of ERG leads said that all events are open. So that's 4 out of 5 say all events are open. 51% say that it's hybrid. So they've maybe got some events that are closed. So maybe they're running some safe space type events or something, and they're closed. So those are some of the statistics. So it's kind of a mixed picture. But I would say the majority are kind of open. The majority are leaning towards open. And as I say, with what came out in the States, our survey was run before the executive orders in the States. I reckon if we ran that survey now, with what's happened in the States, I think we'd probably have more ERGs now saying it's open just because of what has happened legally in the States. And then also the influence on other ERGs as well, particularly any ERG that's, sort of like tied to an organization that is global. Okay. Let me just share with you a little story about my experience of being, it wasn't an employee resource group. It was a specialist sort of advisory group that had been brought together by an organization, a clinical organization that was interested in research. It was actually psychological research. And they had specifically brought together a group of individuals from different ethnicities because they were concerned that when it came to research and approving things like funding and what research should go ahead, they were concerned that they did not have ethnic diversity, right? And so they brought on an advisory group of individuals from different ethnic backgrounds, with either lived experience or, maybe family members with sort of mental health challenges, etc. So I joined this advisory group. It's great, actually. It had 1 or 2 allies in, so people who were from a white British background. And I remember there was the one conversation about membership of the group. And there was one particular individual who, a white British man, fairly fairly sort of like middle class, fairly senior, was retired actually. And he sort of explained, so we were talking about, membership, and he explained, oh, well, I know I don't fit the criteria, but I just love to come and learn, so he was there really to learn. But the other thing I would add is, even though he said he was coming to learn, and so a lot of people would think that means listening, he did a lot of talking. I'm just saying, he did a lot of talking for somebody that had no lived experience, wasn't really knowledgeable. He did a lot of talking, and neither did he have a clinical background, right? So it's not like he was technical. He wasn't. He just, I think he, to be honest, I think he just wanted the company. Right? And I think sometimes I wouldn't be surprised in employee resource groups if you sometimes get this. I say this to somebody, right? So my grandmother had 10 children, right? So I'm from a big family. And what I sometimes notice is sometimes when there are partners of individuals, so newbies, in-laws come in, they kind of love that there's this big family that they can be a part of, right? Especially if they themselves are from a small family. So I wonder sometimes when it comes to allies and employee resource groups, sometimes are they just wanting to come somewhere where they feel a sense of community, right? There could be some of that in it, right? I think in terms of intent. So one of the things I always say is always assume positive intent, right? Always assume positive intent, even though that story that I told you at the top of the video around the post on LinkedIn, where the assumption was that that individual was a saboteur, the reality was they may have just been wanting to learn. It may just have been an individual that maybe members of that employee resource group had problems with them in the past, but maybe the individual, and I am being a little bit of a Pollyanna now, but maybe that individual was like, look, I need to learn more about what these individuals are going through. And so actually I want to just go and sit in. And that brings me to, what are the benefits of having allies in your meetings, whether it be planning meetings or more involved in all types of different events? Well, so here's the thing, that one of the main benefits you get from having allies in, as I say, sometimes we run things like listening circles. And one of the reasons we do that is so that people that don't have that lived experience, they get to listen and hear what it is like for others that do go through what that group is going through, right? So that is one of the benefits of having allies in the room. You're more likely to end up with more empathy, not only with those individuals that come in, those allies, but when they leave, albeit they're not going to like go and spill everything that they've heard and breach confidentiality, but you will probably find that they become a stronger ally. They become more of an advocate of the group outside, and they start to champion the group more because they're now more empathetic, right? They've heard the challenges firsthand and it's resonated. So you're getting buy-in from the heart, right? That's what happens when people hear lived experience. Typically, it kind of touches them in the heart rather than in the head. So that's one of the real benefits of having allies in. One of the other benefits I would say, specifically in having allies in your planning meetings or your committee meetings, is getting new ideas in. We talk about diversity of thought or just diversity, right? One of the business cases around diversity is that it drives innovation and creativity, right? So if you want to get innovation and creativity in the way your employee resource group is being run, get different perspectives in, right? Some of the things that I hear is we want DEI to be as embedded in business as usual as health and safety is. So get somebody from the health and safety team into your ERG, to actually get those ideas and understand how those things happen. Don't be so like closed. Don't be so siloed in your thinking that you're not open to different ideas and different perspectives just because you think, well, they haven't had our lived experience, so therefore they can't know what it's like, right? You can still get some really good ideas from those individuals. And then finally as well, one of the other benefits that you can get from having allies in the room is that you can test things out, you can test ideas out on the allies. So they're not part of the community, but obviously part of what an ERG is trying to do is raise awareness, raise advocacy, improve the culture in the organization. And by having allies in the room, if, for example, there is an idea for for example, some piece of education or some way of raising awareness, you can test it with those allies and say, what do you think? How is this going to land? Right. So that's another really good reason for having allies in your meetings, particularly in your planning and committee meetings. Some of the caveats then. So how do you get allies in kind of without them taking over? How do you avoid the situation that I had in that race and ethnicity advisory group? So one of the things that you can do is you can be really clear with your terms of reference. I'm a big fan of having clear purpose, clear terms of reference, clear roles, and I'll get onto the roles. But in terms of the terms of reference around things like meetings, so if you have, for example, a planning meeting or a committee meeting, I mean, that should have a terms of reference anyway around the purpose, what it's there for, some of the rules around confidentiality. So all of these are really good guidelines for anybody that goes to that meeting. They can read those rules and they can see, okay, confidentiality. I know that when I leave the room, I'm not allowed to share, for example, individual stories that have been shared in here, or if I want to share, I have to ask permission, or whatever, however you want to define the rules. But having clear rules and structure around, in particular, those planning and committee meetings when you have allies in, will help to maintain an element of safety. I don't want to lie to you and sort of say that, especially if you've been closed for a long time, you suddenly have to open. I'm not going to sit here and say that it's not going to feel different and that it may not feel awkward, but there's always just an element of just lean into the awkwardness, talk about the awkwardness. If you have to actually talk about the fact that it feels awkward, and talk about how you can make it feel less awkward. So what is there in terms of guidelines, or how the meeting is run, or how the meeting is facilitated? And good meeting facilitation is key for a lot of these things to sort of get rid of some of that awkwardness. Things like icebreakers and other things that can be used. I'm going to be doing lots more videos on engagement and how you engage remotely and all of that sort of thing. So I don't want to go into that too much here, but there are ways of driving a good meeting to drive out some of the awkwardness, putting people into smaller groups, into pairs, whether it be remote, so you're putting them into small breakout rooms, or physically in a room, or you're getting people to speed network. The key really, when you get allies in, the key is how do you build up trust really quickly, right? And so trust comes from, you get to know people, you get to know somebody, and there's a little bit of vulnerability. So the key is, how do you drive that? So things like speed networking, sharing information, the icebreakers, as I mentioned, getting people together physically, if you can, is always great in terms of really accelerating that getting to know people and building trust. So I think that's really key. If you have been closed for a long time and you're now opening up, you got to figure out ways to build relationships, build bridges, build trust, get people to know and like each other on a human level, right? Ignoring the labels and the different sort of identity badges that we wear. Okay. Having clear roles is really important. And I actually believe that we need to become better at defining roles for not just individuals within the committee that have a specific role, whether it be, communication or events, whatever, but roles for members. What is the responsibility and the role of a member? Okay. And being really clear about that. And then you may want to differentiate between the role and responsibility of a member who has lived experience, if this is a lived experience ERG, and then you may want to have a specific role and responsibility if it's an ally, right? But being really clear about those roles. I don't think it should be a situation where there is no clear role definition for members, and then you're having to write a role definition for allies. I don't think it should be like that. I think you should have a role definition for members, which is around supporting the ERG, turning up at events, contributing, supporting other peers, offering information, advice, all of those things, because you're trying to drive an engaged ERG, which is something I'm going to talk about at length. So having a specific role that explains what the role is for members who are of that lived experience and or not, right? So for allies is really important. The other thing that you can do as you're opening up, you can survey members and allies and just get feedback on the things that will work. So I know this network I was working with a couple of years ago, this is something they did when they were looking to move from it being very closed and everything was closed to it being open. it went out to a vote, right? So that is something that you can do, put it out to a vote, but don't just have it as a vote, which is yes or no, as in, should we have allies in, yes or no? Kind of phrase it more as, we are going to be welcoming allies in, what is it that we can do to make sure that this works? And maybe offer some multi-choice options out there just to make sure that things go smoothly. And again, ask about what it is that people would like to do to make sure that relationships and trust is built. Okay. The other piece of advice I want to leave you with finally is to speak to your exec sponsor, because the benefit of having an exec sponsor is that they have quite a broad strategic perspective, and they can look across the organization and they can advise you in terms of what they think will work. One of the skills that they have, right, to be a senior leader in theory, is that they're good at relationships. They're good at building bridges. So if you're not sure how to go about this, speak to your exec sponsor and get some advice from them as well. And that's it. I hope that this has been really useful in terms of navigating this space. If you've got some questions, or if you've got a really tricky situation when it comes to allies, then please do drop some questions below, and I'll do my best to answer them. If you want to ask me a question confidentially, or you can always reach out on a DM or an email, or you can DM me on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is where I tend to talk about this and lots of wider topics as well. And that's everything. So thank you so much for listening. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. Share it with your ERG colleagues or anybody else you know that will find this useful. More content to come. But please give me your questions so I know what kind of content you want me to make. So far, I'm just running through all of the questions that I get asked a lot in the work that I do with employee resource groups. So I hope that was useful, and I will see you next time. Go with grace.